And as far as how did I how did Stratis come about? I basically, from my experience in Bitcoin and blockchain technology, and also my day-to-day corporate experience, I could see a huge gap in the market, and we basically wanted to fill that gap, and that was where Stratis was founded from.
Okay. Now, did you come up with the idea for what was the problem that you saw in the markets that inspired you to come up with the Stratis platform? Did you see that there was a niche that needed to be filled in the cryptocurrency market? Was there a gap that was missing, or was there a problem that was unsolved? What did you see that inspired you to come up with the Stratis platform?
Yeah, so I mean, there's several points, but the main one being in corporate environments, the dominant language, the majority of a corporation's development resources are usually C# and .NET. So as of now, the C# and .NET development communities don't have any full node framework to develop blockchain applications on. I mean, we've got Bitcoin, which was developed by Nicholas Dorier, who's also part of the project, and that did give developers the opportunity to develop blockchain applications, but there wasn't actually a full end-to-end development platform for that purpose. So the idea was to build the Stratis platform, which will allow businesses to develop, test, and deploy their applications all under this one platform. So with our full node framework, developers are able to develop applications and platforms on the blockchain. With our blockchain as a service platform, they're then able to provision nodes that they can then test their application on. And then on the same blockchain as a service platform, they can actually deploy that application and then scale it out as the demand requires.
Okay, so just for the people that are non-technical on our channel, because our channels consists of mostly crypto investors and traders, right? So when you say that C# and .NET is the dominant language in the business world and the computer world, can you compare that to, like, let's say for example, English is the most popular spoken language in the world, and then are you saying that all the cryptocurrencies, none of them or Bitcoin is written in that dominant language so that it's accessible to everyone? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. Bitcoin Core is written in C++, which it's very hard to find skilled C++ developers in this day and age. But with C# and .NET, they're way more accessible. And the other part of it as well is in a corporate environment, if you look at the desktop on the desk of all of the employees, the majority of those line of business applications that run on those desktops are actually .NET applications. So what this platform actually allows us to do is it opens up the door for all of the existing .NET line of business applications to actually integrate blockchain technology into that application.
Okay.
So I have a quick question about that. So the IDE, the development tool for .NET and C# is Visual Studio.
Correct.
If I'm a Microsoft C# developer and I basically live in Visual Studio, could you describe what would I see as a developer? If I'm one of these corporate developers that I do C# day in and day out, what do I see if I'm trying to use Stratis?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll go back to Bitcoin at this point, because currently Bitcoin is actually in production use. So if you're a C# .NET developer and you're developing in Visual Studio, the package manager inside Visual Studio is called NuGet, and you can actually go to this package manager and install Bitcoin into your .NET project, and then that gives you the full functionality of Bitcoin. It will be the same with the Stratis full node framework. So it will be a package that's installed via the inbuilt package manager in Visual Studio, and then that will allow you to then go and use that full functionality. One of the things that we're trying to do is simplify the development process for blockchain applications. So as part of this platform, we're going to have a blockchain university that reduces the learning curve for C# and .NET developers to actually pick up the Stratis platform and start developing blockchain applications.
Okay, so it's more like a framework or a library or a plugin that as C# developers can just add to Visual Studio. Like I'm sure Visual Studio has many other of these such libraries. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And at this time, the only library or framework in existence that I would say is fit for purpose that I could actually recommend somebody use it in production is mBitcoin. And I mean, we'll probably cover how that actually came about, but when I decided to actually move forward with the Stratis project, and there was this whole focus of C# and .NET, sorry, one of my first steps was to actually go out there and do research. Is there any competition? Is anyone doing this already? And that was how I found mBitcoin and Nicholas Dorier. So Nicholas Dorier actually released a blog post in the early hours of this morning, just explaining how the relationship with Stratis come about, because it's a very funny situation with Nicholas, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware of him, but he's actually a Bitcoin core developer. And when I first approached him, he basically laughed at me. He basically said, "You've got no chance." But when I actually explained what we was trying to do and what we was trying to achieve, he actually sat back and said, "Okay, maybe I need to look at this closer." And it ended up with him actually joining the project and being with us on this journey, which is brilliant.
Okay, but before we go into the questions about Nicholas, I do have some questions, and so does Leon, about Nicholas's involvement. I just want the audience, so that the audience can understand, right? When you say that the C# .NET is the dominant language in computers and business and stuff, can you give us an idea, like if C# and I mean, what is their market share? Is that 90% of the business applications out there are written in C# and Bitcoin is written in the language that Bitcoin is written in, that's only like 10% of the market? Or do you have an estimate or an idea?
Yeah, as far as a percentage of line of business applications, I don't believe there's any actual figures for that, but the C# development community is actually comparable to the likes of Java, which is a huge development community. But when it actually comes to corporate environments, line of business applications, C# and .NET is definitely the dominant language. I mean, for instance, if you look at the market share of actual desktop estates, that's got to be 80% Windows PCs on desktops. I mean, most organizations do have some Macs in there, but the majority, if you work in a corporate environment, the majority of the desktops are Windows-based desktops.
Okay, so basically the audience can just look around and see how many desktops and PCs there are on the market, and that's how dominant that computer language is. If that's the case, right, then it's pretty dominant. That would be, I mean, like, my first thought is, like, why didn't, like, Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin core developers, why didn't they write the Bitcoin code in that language? Why write it in a language that is not dominant in the market? Is there a reason for that? Is there a security reason, or?
That's a very good question, actually.
Because if Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the Bitcoin software in C#, like you said, which is the dominant business computing language, right? Then there would be no need for the Stratis platform, correct?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a very good point. I guess it comes down to skill set. I mean, you always will try and develop in the language that you're most proficient in first. And if it's not fit for purpose, or there's some technical reason why you can't use that language, you will then look at other languages. So Satoshi must have looked at C++ and said, "Yep, it's fit for purpose. I can develop this. I can develop Bitcoin in C++," and went ahead with it. And there was probably another factor. One of the gripes that many people have had with Microsoft and their .NET framework over the years is that it's been closed source. Yeah. So when Satoshi developed Bitcoin, .NET was closed source. It doesn't make sense developing a decentralized platform on a closed source framework. It just doesn't make any sense. And in the last year, Microsoft's released what they're calling .NET Core, which is their new version of .NET, which runs natively on Linux and Mac OS. So previously, in order to run .NET code on Linux and Mac OS, you had to use an emulator called Mono. Now Microsoft's removed that requirement totally, so it's actually going to run native on OS X and Linux. So that gives you access to the full capabilities of the underlying OS. And the other thing that they've done is they've actually open sourced .NET for the first time. So that was a huge factor in my decision to actually go ahead with this project, because I didn't want to release a project and then come up against roadblocks with people saying, oh, but your decentralized open source project is built on a closed source framework. So .NET going open source is a very big deal.
Okay, so basically, if Satoshi Nakamoto was working on this project, releasing this project at this moment in time, then he may have considered the C# .NET, because now it's an open source computing language instead of being closed source like it was in the past.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. While you touched on the university, how does adding provisioning of other blockchains add value to Stratis?
Because the blockchain as a service platform, it just gives it more reach. If we only provided Stratus nodes, then that would only apply to the use cases for Stratus. But at the end of the day, I don't share this capitalist dog-eat-dog mentality. As far as I'm concerned, blockchain is still in its infancy. So there's no need for blockchain projects to see each other as the enemy at this moment in time. There's enough room for all projects to collaborate together. So if we can allow other blockchain nodes to be developed on the platform and to allow developers to develop applications on those innovative platforms, then we're all for it.
Yeah, and speaking of blockchain as a service, as you know, Microsoft Azure is kind of endorsing many blockchain applications, like for example, Ethereum and Factom and Lisk, and there's about half a dozen of these that they're hosting on Microsoft Azure. Are you guys trying to get on Microsoft Azure or any sort of partnership with Microsoft? Because when we were watching the Lisk ICO, they were kind of like not, their ICO was kind of like just fewer Bitcoins, not too many Bitcoins, and then they announced that Microsoft was going to host them on Microsoft Azure, and that's when it just exploded.
Yes.
That was the pattern, and it's happened repeatedly for every coin, every crypto project that Microsoft got behind.
Yes.
But you guys seem to be focused on Microsoft, right? It's on C#, but yet I don't see any partnership or connection with Microsoft as of now. Are you working towards that, and how are you working towards that?
So as far as getting added to the Azure blockchain as a service platform, we are working on it, but to be honest, it's not a huge priority for us, because although we are focused on Microsoft .NET technologies, Azure is a competitor for Stratis.
Okay, so I have a question about this, about your Stratis technology. So you saw that my understanding is that you saw that there was a gap in the market where the cryptocurrency technology is not being written in the most dominant computer language, a business computer language, right?
Yeah.
How come you are the first person to see this? I'm sure there's other programmers out there and developers out there that must have seen this too. I mean, I'm not a computer coder, but I mean, if I step into, if I see a really popular book that's written in, let's say, Vietnamese, where I come from in Vietnam, and I know this story or this book or this novel is extremely famous and very popular, and it's a top-selling novel in my country, and then I come to America, and I know that English is the dominant language here and in the world, why I would want to translate that into English as soon as possible. How come someone has not tried to translate this project into the most popular computer business language yet?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I can't profess to being the first, because Nicholas did see the gap, and he started working on Bitcoin in 2004, about 2 years ago. But we've spoken about this at great length because, I mean, when I first started speaking to Nicholas, I was very disappointed that he had not built more traction with his Bitcoin, because I could see the gap that he was filling. But the problem with Nicholas is he is an out-and-out developer. He's not a marketing guy. He's not a business guy. He's just a developer. So that's what he does. So Bitcoin, although it's strong technically and it provides great functionality, it doesn't have that that marketing behind it that's required to actually bring it up to that next level.
Okay, so how I read some stuff on Nicholas. He's your core developer, right?
He's our lead developer of our Bitcoin full node framework.
Okay, from what I've read about him, he seems to be a die-hard Bitcoin maximalist, meaning that, you know, the Bitcoin maximalists are people that only believe in Bitcoin and no other cryptocurrency or altcoin. So how did you get him to transition from being a Bitcoin? Because he states all over that he does not support any altcoin or any other cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin. So I mean, he's like the Tone They of Bitcoin developers. You know, so
he is, yeah. And to be honest, he hasn't transitioned, and I haven't changed his thought process at all. He's still a Bitcoin maximalist, and as far as he's concerned, there is no such thing as altcoins, and there is no such thing as blockchain technology. There is only Bitcoin. But I made such a compelling argument that of the value that we're going to add to Bitcoin, that he just could not turn down the opportunity. And then there's another side to it as well, because we're effectively paying him to work on something that he loves, his own project that he's invested the last 2 years in. So now he's actually getting to work on it in a paid capacity.
So,
but he hasn't changed his opinion on altcoins. And for him, I guess the difference between Stratus and other altcoins is that we're actually a development platform rather than just being an altcoin. So there's many components to this platform that we're actually building. And we get asked the question a lot. So you're developing this Bitcoin full node framework that Nicholas is working on, but how does that benefit Stratis? And my answer to that is always the reason why we're using Nicholas and building on top of Bitcoin is because we want to build our platform using the proven architecture of Bitcoin. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Bitcoin over the last 7 years has proved to be the most secure cryptocurrency out there. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a good starting point for any startup wanting to offer blockchain services to corporations. And the work that Nicholas is doing on our full node framework will then be translated to the Stratus platform. So all of that good work that Nicholas is doing is going to be translated into the Stratus platform. And I mean, if anyone gets a chance to read Nicholas's blog post from this morning, he actually touches on that subject, and he basically says that Stratus is going to add value to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will add value to Stratus. And I think that that's a brilliant relationship and a great position to be in. And the other point for having Nicholas involved and building on top of the Bitcoin architecture is somewhere down the line, I'd like for Stratus to be seen in the same light as companies like Blockstream. So as far as I'm concerned, to be seen in the same light as those guys, we need to be innovating on Bitcoin.
Okay, so if you're using the software code that the code that Nicholas is working on, you call it in Bitcoin, in as in November, and then Bitcoin, right? So it's just so that our audience, because sometimes if somebody's new, they might not recognize what you just said there. So if you have Nicholas working, he's writing the code and building the code for the in Bitcoin software, and the Stratis team is going to use that in Bitcoin. Wouldn't that make it that you guys are working on the Bitcoin blockchain? I mean, so that, to me, I don't know. I'm not a technical person, but it sounds like to me that you're just working on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, and that was a question I have. If you could, a follow-up to that, Chris, is how is the Stratis token, since you guys seem to be building on Bitcoin and on Bitcoin, how is the Stratis token that us investors bought during your ICO? How does that tie into Stratis? Yeah, that's the question. Like, what are these tokens that we bought going to be used for?
Yeah. So if I explain the actual at a very high level, the process of how we're actually going to develop up this platform and then migrate over to it, it'll probably give you a better understanding. But so what Nicholas is doing now is he's taken Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a rewrite of Bitcoin Core in C# and .NET, and it provides probably 80% of the functionality that Bitcoin Core provides. The last 20% that it does not provide is full node, full validation. So keeping a full copy of the blockchain and also validating blocks and transactions. So he's working on the Stratus Bitcoin full node is going to be that last 20% that provides things like the network layer for peer-to-peer communications, etc. Once that's complete, we will then take that. We will then modify it for Stratus. We will implement the private chain technology over the top of it. And then that will actually form the base for the Stratus parent blockchain moving forward.
So what you're saying is that you're going to create a private chain, I guess, anchored to the Bitcoin blockchain.
Hey, just real quick, Leon, can you back up from the camera? Because all we see is your eyeballs.
Yeah. So you're saying that you're going to create the Stratus chain. What I just heard from you is going to be somehow anchored to the Bitcoin blockchain. And
no,
you're going no.
Sorry. So once Nicholas has completed that work to complete the last 20%, we will actually take that full node framework and we'll actually fork it. So it will be completely separate blockchain, completely isolated blockchain, and then we implement our private chain functionality into that code base. So that will allow businesses to deploy private chains pegged to the Stratus chain.
Okay, so it's going to be a completely separate Stratus, completely separate chain.
Exactly. Yeah, the only relationship that we have with Bitcoin is that we're developing up this full node framework to actually work with Bitcoin. So moving forward, we'll maintain a Bitcoin full node framework and also a Stratus full node framework. And the idea is that any innovations that we make on the Stratus full node framework that can be implemented into the Bitcoin Core framework without a hard fork, Nicholas will actually create BIPs for. So in Nicholas's blog post, he actually talks about a BIP that he's at a Bitcoin improvement proposal that he's actually already put in and that he's working on in our full node framework. So you could see BIPs coming back from Stratus into Bitcoin, and that's where the value comes from the Stratus project for Bitcoin. And just quickly, the other real benefit that we've got of developing our Bitcoin full node framework is it allows us to market in Bitcoin areas, Bitcoin communities that you would just not be able to market in if you're an altcoin, if you don't have this Bitcoin element to your project. So places like the Bitcoin Reddit, for instance. I mean, I challenge someone to go on there and post a link to their altcoin project and see if it ever gets onto the first page, because it won't. But having our full node framework and this value that we bring to Bitcoin allows us to market in those areas.
Okay, so you really are developing. So these are almost two completely separate projects that you're developing. Stratis, which has a Stratis blockchain. It's going to be like, if I'm a C# developer, I'm going to be using this Stratis blockchain. But you also have this implementation of, like, you're first building a Bitcoin full node in C#. That once that's complete, you're going to fork that into what will be the Stratis blockchain, and then develop the Visual Studio and .NET tools on this separate chain. Is that what?
Correct.
Okay.
Spot on.
And I guess this separate chain. But what did we just buy during your ICO? Like, we bought this token, these Stratis tokens. And this doesn't exist yet, right? Like the Stratis, that's why you raised the money. Like, are you eventually going to what is the blockchain that exists today where the Stratis tokens that we are all holding and trading, is that going to be thrown out when and replaced with like, how could you explain how is that? I'm confused. I'm very confused.
No, that's a good question. This is going to be great information for the investors, definitely. So we decided to release a interim wallet shortly after the ICO completed, and the reason why we chose to do that is because we wanted to kickstart the blockchain and be decentralized straight away. So we didn't want all ICO investors to have to trust a third party, aka us. So the simplest way to actually get around that was to release an interim wallet, which is literally just a clone of Bitcoin Core that would then allow everybody to secure their own holdings. And so once the actual full node platform's released, there'll actually be a very, very simple upgrade process that you'll actually download, install a new wallet, open a new wallet, and it will actually pull in your private keys from your old interim wallet. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible. When a new full node framework comes out, you should just be able to download a wallet and carry on as you have been. And the token that everybody purchased during the ICO is going to become that Stratis blockchain. There will be no additional coins minted. There will be no pre-mine. It will be one-on-one Stratis as you see it now into this Stratis blockchain with a very simple migration path.
Okay, so really what happens is the Stratis wallet we have right now is just a fork of Bitcoin Core. Yes. And when Nicholas and your team complete the project, you will issue another wallet written in C#, right? Because that's what you're doing. That will just then upgrade the Stratis wallet that we currently have. That will replace the wallet that everyone's using today. Just the ICO tokens. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, yeah, so, and we're also going to ensure that we've got backwards compatibility as well.
Okay. Okay, I see. So it's really you're doing two projects. You're doing one a port of Bitcoin Core to C# for the Bitcoin community, so that if I for some reason want a C# Bitcoin wallet, I can use that to manage my Bitcoins.
Exactly.
And then there will be another fork of that to do this Stratis blockchain that you're working on, and also the tools that you're building for Visual Studio will use the Stratis blockchain and not the Bitcoin blockchain. Is that correct?
Yeah, there'll be two versions. So we'll have a Bitcoin version, a Stratis version. So we're going to offer complete flexibility. Developers will be able to develop for the Stratis blockchain and also for the Bitcoin blockchain if they choose to.
Okay, so but the Bitcoin blockchain is like you said, very fixed. It has its specifications. You have to follow it. So if I'm a .NET developer, I would get more features if I chose to develop my blockchain app with the Stratis blockchain, correct? Because why would I choose the Stratis blockchain over the Bitcoin blockchain if I had that choice?
I guess for some, it's just going to be a matter of preference. There'll be no technical reason as to why they choose Bitcoin over Stratis. It would just be a matter of preference. But Stratis will provide additional functionality that will not be provided in the Bitcoin version, and that's simply because some of these changes just will never get implemented into Bitcoin. So the functionality is not going to be available on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay, so one of the things in your white papers is you made a big deal of private chains, right? That was a section in your white paper that's something Stratis can offer, is that you can create your own private chain that has your own specifications. Yeah. That was one thing that you wrote in your white paper. But my thought on that was, if it's a private chain, why? I mean, the strength of blockchain is decentralization and censorship resistance, and that's why people started using Bitcoin. If this is a private chain that no one else can look at, like, why don't I just use an SQL? Why do I need a blockchain in that case? Why can't I just use an SQL database if it's going to just be a private chain that I control?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. When we so Stratus was in the planning stages and the conceptualization stages for about 5 months before we actually even announced the project. I guess when it came out, a lot of people thought, oh, Stratus is just trying to capitalize on the ICO hype, but that was not the case at all. We'd been working on this project for 4 months before we even actually announced it. And everything you see in the white paper is stuff that we can deliver. I did not want to put things into the white paper that were innovative or bleeding edge that we were not 100% sure that we could actually deliver. So the private chain tech, we are 100% sure that we can deliver, but we will be making innovations in the area of side chains. So we won't just be referring the private chains. There will be side chains that are completely decentralized on the side chain. And there's going to be a lot of different options available to corporations that want to deploy, whether it be side chains or private chains. So, okay. But that's a very good point that you raise about why would you want to use a centralized blockchain? Why not just use a database instead? But there are some use cases where a private chain is actually fit for purpose. And I mean, some financial organizations just will not deploy that application on a decentralized platform. So if they can get the benefit of blockchain technology, but without some of the risks that they foresee with decentralization, and I see this sort of sitting in, I mean, one use case, for example, would be if a company had regional offices with somebody in each regional office they needed consensus for a task between all of those people. It would actually allow them to do that on a private chain. Although everybody can't just download the source code and run a node, they still get the benefits of blockchain technology.
Okay, so I would see a private chain being useful, like among entities or parties that don't trust each other. Like even like, for example, banks. If I'm Bank A and I'm doing business with Bank B and C and D, and I myself, we don't trust each other, right? Like exactly. That's where I see where maybe a private chain could work, is among groups of people, group entities that, during the financial crisis, the banks stopped trusting each other. Like, I don't believe that you actually have my money, right?
Exactly.
That's where I see an application. But one thing I would challenge you on is, let's say 6 months, a year from now, you finish building the Stratis platform. What types of applications, like if I'm a corporate developer, one of these corporate developers, or I'm charging one of these projects, could you give us an example of a application that I would develop using Stratis instead of the traditional 3-tier client server, database, SQL database model that we have today? Could you give me an example of an app that I would write if I'm a corporation and I'm starting a new project? Why would I use Stratis versus what I'm using now? Like, what type of application would I use Stratis for? Could you give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, something that we're actually working on right now, but I can't really share any of the details because it's not been defined. But if you had an organization that had, for instance, regional offices all around the world, and they had, say, a small regional office in Singapore. Now, they didn't want to install any infrastructure in that regional office. They didn't want to install any servers, any kit. That comes with problems around authentication. So how do they authenticate the user if there's no infrastructure over there to actually process that authentication? That is a great use case for this technology, because it would allow them to issue the individual with a private key. And as long as that person had the private key, they could then authenticate their identity using the blockchain.
Okay, so I'm thinking of maybe something like when you said that, I'm thinking of something like in the government, like the CIA or something, where they have this agent that they don't really know who they are, and they just say, I'm going to dead drop a private key in a garbage can or something, and I don't want to know who you are, and I can still authenticate you, even though, you know, more like a Mission Impossible type.
Well, yours sounds much better. Yours sounds much better than mine.
Okay.